Okay, so now that we've talked about cellular respiration, we need to talk about fermentation. All right, so let's say we're doing this process, we're sitting there, we're working, and then we fall into the water and we're underwater, so we have to hold our breath. So if you hold your breath, what's going to be missing? Well, you're going to be missing oxygen. So if you don't have oxygen, and oxygen's not stealing the electrons from here, then they're not stealing from here, who's not stealing from here, who's not stealing from here. So this whole process, the electron transfer chain, shuts down if there's no oxygen present. And so if we're not stealing from the NADH, then our NADHs start to build up in the system. And so when NADH builds up, this starts to shut down. Okay, and this starts to shut down. So as NADHs build up, you're shutting down basically everything going on in the mitochondria. So then your body's thinking, oh my word, how do I get ATP? Well, if you remember, glycolysis produces ATP. It only produces 2 ATP per sugar molecule, which is an incredible waste. But it's enough to keep you alive for, I don't know, how long can you hold your breath? A couple minutes, right? And then your brain cells will start to starve. So it will do glycolysis until it starves, until it runs out of glucose. So let's look at this process. We're putting ATP in, we're breaking the sugar into pyruvates, we're building a tiny bit of ATP, which gets used, and we're building this NADH, but the NADH has nowhere to go because the electron transfer chain's not running. So instead, these electrons get put right back onto the pyruvate. Okay, and that changes it into one of 2 products depending on who you are. If you're a human, it's going to change it into lactate, which becomes lactic acid in your muscles. Okay, if you're a bacteria, it's going to change it into ethanol, which is the alcohol. So this is fermentation, alcoholic fermentation. Okay, so in us, lactate will build up in your muscles. So if you sprint, you're not breathing, you can't physically breathe in enough oxygen to maintain that level of activity for that long. And so your muscles will begin to ferment. And they'll produce lactate, which turns into lactic acid. Lactic acid has the consistency of like bacon grease. So when your muscles are warm and you're running, it's running through and it's all good. But as soon as if you were to stop and then sit on the couch and watch TV, that lactic acid will solidify in your muscles like bacon grease, and that's what causes soreness and stiffness. Now the other soreness is from torn muscle fibers, and we'll talk about that another time. But most of that stiffness comes from the lactic acid. If you stretch after you run, that lactic acid is going to get circulated out better and you'll feel better. So this, just doing glycolysis becomes fermentation if there's no oxygen present. Okay? Once you start breathing again, this will start up again. If you don't start breathing again, you're a goner. Okay.